Hello, my name is Rogoro and welcome here. Today I'm going to be talking about the death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. The death of Vivek Oji was published in 2020 and the reason I read it was because I saw some people talking about it and I was intrigued because I was like, who's Vivek, but also I don't usually read a lot of mysteries or crime, and at first I thought that's what it was, and in a way you can still argue that it is, though really once you start reading it's a lot more than that. So the death of Vivek Oji basically follows a grieving mother who is in pursuit of the truth surrounding her son's death. Obviously, after his death, Vivek's death, there's a lot of people that he's left behind who are mourning him, including his parents, his family, his friends. And it's not a spoiler to know that Vivek is dead, because obviously that's the title of the book. I mean, from the beginning of the book, you're aware that Vivek is dead, and you're also made aware that death has been somewhat like a shadow in his life. And this is mainly because on the day of his birth, it's also the day that his grandmother dies. So so it must have been interesting for the parents because they lost their mom, but then also had a kid. So death kind of plays a sort of a shadow in his life. So you know that he's going to die, you know that he's dead. And so it's interesting. And so kind of in the book, the mom is kind of the character that's mainly focused on understanding, what happened to him, who brought him home, because someone must have brought him home and that person must have known that he lived there. So she's very obsessed with kind of just finding that truth to be able to kind of let him go. And that's kind of her way of grieving. And so you're kind of curious, about his death. When you read, you want to find out who killed him and, what happened. But actually, as you start to read, Akwaeke kind of draws you in and you're curious about the character. So you're not only curious about how he died, but also how he lived. So basically, it's through a kind of third-person narrative. It's kind of through a third-person narrative that Emezi sort of gives us the overview of, around Vivek's life. So you get to know, where he lived, how his parents met, who are his friends, and just kind of the whole context of the story. This is in Nigeria, and so it's good, but it kind of intercuts with now first-person narratives by other characters, most notably Osita. So Osita is Vivek's cousin, and he's the one who kind of gives us more of a personal, intimate observations and recollections of his experience and his engagement with Vivek. So it's through him that we kind of get to know things that his parents and other people wouldn't have known. And it's really interesting because Osita and Vivek are really around the same age. They grew up around each other, and as cousins, they sort of grew up around the similar influences. And so as they grow and as they develop in kind of becoming sort of men, I guess, quote unquote, in society, we get to really look, I guess, into masculinity through Osita, who's kind of grown up with this idea, this very solid, rigid idea of what masculinity is, which is kind of the typical tough, no emotions, no kind of vulnerability. So he's not one for vulnerabilities, and Vivek is. And so I think through the story you kind of see that his own struggle with being vulnerable makes him sort of build a distance, kind of builds a distance between him and Vivek. So this kind of, I think, makes it hard for him to connect and be aware of things that Vivek is going through. So he's going through some mental health issues or challenges. He's going through some eating challenges too. I don't know if I can call it, maybe eating disorders of some kind, and also going through some identity matters or changes. And Osita, you know, he has access to Vivek, but I think he's very scared and very nervous about kind of going and exploring that, because it's so not normal, quote unquote, in the context that they're in. And actually, you know, but as the character develops and Vivek kind of doesn't change himself, he explores who he is, and he develops. So, you know, the difference between kind of how Osita and Vivek, you know, perceive their identity and masculinity is one of kind of the most powerful elements in the book. So it's nice to see how Vivek sort of, by being so courageous and being someone who's like, you know, this is who I am and I'm going to just keep doing me the way I do me, is one of the, it's quite good, and it has an effect on Osita over time, where he basically comes from being so hardened to being free to kind of explore his own softness and kind of coming to find comfort and joy within that. And I think that comes through because Emezi writes so beautifully, like vulnerability and just that space that people create outside of I don't know, the watchful eyes of society. And so I like that about the book. So despite Vivek being already dead from the beginning, he still has his own sort of small chapters that come in between the book, and there he kind of is writing from, or you know, present from the great beyond. So it's almost like he's looking down, and once he has like small little comments on things, and it's nice, you know, it was effective in a way, because you kind of feel like that sadness and longing for him to be around, and kind of feel sorry that he's dead, but at the same time I felt like it was a missed opportunity in terms of him having his own chance to kind of write and tell his own story, even if he's already dead. Because I guess my logic was, if he can come back for these small chapters and say what he needs to say, then maybe he could have also come back and kind of retold his own story from his own perspective. Because yeah, it's good to hear what everyone else thought of him, but you kind of want to also hear from him. And I think that's probably one of the only small, tiny shortcomings of the book. It doesn't undo anything in terms of the greatness of the novel altogether, but it's one of the things, one of the elements that I was kind of like, oh, I kind of wish I got to actually know Vivek from Vivek's perspective, as opposed to all the other characters. And I think this is also because I felt there were other supporting characters were given, you know, really well-rounded characters, which is great, but I felt like they were given too much time, that I felt like, okay, I wouldn't have minded giving them less time and giving more of that to Vivek. So that's probably the only shortcoming, but still doesn't undo the whole reading experience. It just feels like it would have been great for him to be able to use his voice wherever he was, even if that voice was robbed from him when he was alive. One of the key themes that I really liked, or one of the things that I really admired about Emezi's writing, was kind of her ability to use, I guess, symbolism, and maybe I would refer to her use of hair. So I feel like hair is one of the key, I can't really call it a theme, but it's one of the key elements in the book that says a lot about what the book was about and what I personally took from it. So hair, from the beginning, it's how Vivek's dad kind of recognizes Vivek's mom, because she has like this long hair, and he notices that, and he's like, oh, she's beautiful. It's how when the kids are at school, because it has this, it's in this kind of context where you have the Indian and African interrelationships. So some of the people have hair that's kind of more Indian and, I don't know, longer, and you know, and then you have more of the, like, the African texture, quote unquote African, I don't know, like Afro-ish textures, or short hair. And so kind of the variety of hair, and kind of capturing how through hair there's always, especially I think from an African perspective, because most people have grown up being told, you know, like beautiful hair is long and straight, and it looks nice when it's like this and not like that. And so just the role of hair and kind of playing a role in identifying someone, or is being part of someone's identity, was really, I think, you just can't ignore it in the book. So Vivek has really long hair, and this kind of leads his parents and people around him to be like, this makes you look less like a man. And one of the quotes I really love is that he kind of responds by being like, I wasn't one to begin with anyway. So and I thought that was just really impactful, because it's like by him growing out his hair, he's able to kind of defy all the rules and regulations around what makes you a man and what makes you you. And that was empowering, I think, for anyone who would be reading the book. At some point, Vivek's hair is also kind of accused as being a source for demonic energy, and this is now where the theme of a kind of extremist religion or / extremist beliefs comes into play, because for someone to go, your hair is demonic, let's cut it off. It was one of the frightening moments in the book, and I think it was also even more empowering when he constantly refused to get rid of it, and so his hair becomes a source of energy, almost in the same way that hair has become a kind of a form of resistance for a lot of people. Whether you are Black / African hairs, whether it's by your braids or by wearing out your afro, like the hair always makes a statement. So kind of reading this and seeing the role that hair plays in the book, I thought that was really interesting and empowering, because it is. It is. And also I think it was also a good element of also exploring privilege, because most people with obviously longer hair, a lot of times, because of what we've been told by again and again, are usually seen as so beautiful and being protected, because they're beautiful, and when you have beauty you also get protection. But in the case of Vivek, it's made clear that even his kind of, let's say, mixed race / half caste identity doesn't protect him from what happens to him. So it's this idea that it's kind of an intersectionality of different things, of race and identity, and things and matters that maybe sometimes our cultures or our communities are not ready to deal with. So then people get hurt under that, and so that's why the book is effective, because it's quite sad that in society there are people who can't be themselves, because people are not willing to sit and understand. People would rather use Bible quotes or religion or just pure ignorance to kind of justify why they can't sit and listen and understand someone who's different from them. So definitely, I think, even though to me maybe I thought when I was reading the actual information about how Vivek died, I thought some of it was maybe a little bit predictable, which I still felt didn't undo at all my experience of the whole book. But one of the kind of things that I took away was just how great Emezi's writing is, and how I loved just how vulnerability was written. I loved how she was able to kind of capture a lot of the beauty and a lot of that sort of coming of age element of the story. I thought that was so good. I loved the characters. I felt they were so real, so relatable. To an extent. I mean, they were real. You could empathize with them, is what I mean. You could empathize with the characters, and I thought the way that she wrote vulnerability and just kind of letting yourself go and being who you are was just so powerful, as well as being able to kind of capture the fragile nature of identity in the hands of people in the society who are completely indifferent. I thought that was also quite an achievement. So I would definitely recommend this to anyone. I would definitely recommend this to anyone, and I can't wait to read the rest of her books. And I also thought this would make a really good limited series, because that's how I was seeing it. It was so visual, it was so central, that how can I not want to watch this? So definitely, if it's ever made into a series, I would love to watch it. Yeah, but I think that's all. You've read the book and you also liked it. I don't know. Let me know. And I definitely, it's good to read more of also like more West African set stories. I really love those. So yeah, I hope that's interesting to you too. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. If you haven't subscribed, then please do. And yeah, bye. The Death of Vivek Oji is also brilliant. It kind of also challenging and questioning our ideas of what makes a proper man and what makes a proper woman, and whether there should even be such a thing as proper. So that one is one of the things that kind of makes the book really relevant to today's conversations and discussions surrounding identity. And also, especially when it comes to kind of this idea of like, you know, fragile, being not fragile, but being vulnerable is too feminine. Is like it's like an insult. I like how Emezi basically challenges also the idea of being vulnerable as being kind of because people obviously often tend to think, oh, being vulnerable or seeming kind of feminine is like a fragile, terrible thing. But she kind of changes that in one of the quotes, because okay, there are a lot of quotes to like from the book. I have highlighted so many lines, but one of the ones that I really like was, some people can't see softness without wanting to hurt it. I like the quote because it kind of touches on, you know, how, you know, people sometimes have this idea that if you're feminine or, you know, seem feminine and vulnerable, that it's a weakness, but it's not. And people seem to think that because, you know, if you seem feminine or if you seem vulnerable, then people have a right to kind of come and distract you or tamper with you. And so I like that she acknowledges that. But I also like the quote because it makes me think of other things that are soft. So it makes me think of the environment, for instance, how when people see something, you know, beautiful and nice, they want to go and just cut through the Amazon forest, you know, they want to go and put a pipeline between, you know, people's homes and things that are beautiful. So it just made me think of the environment for some reason, and I thought that was true. So it was just multidimensional. That's what I think.